Hello, I'm with Jim Hengy, a 71-year-old retired chemist who's worked for 45 years. Jim is going to tell us a little about the Second World War, his experience through it, what he's learned from it, and his opinion of it. First, I'd like to open up the interview by asking Jim, what was your association with the war?
Being born just before the war started, the first few years was very little, but then I started realizing what the war was about. There was a war in Europe and there was a war in Asia. There was two different wars, really. The war in Europe was caused by, we're not learning from what happened at the end of World War I and enforcing the rules there. The diplomatic corps of the Western powers allowed Hitler to do as he pleased in Europe, and he came to power and just started taking countries right and left. My feelings on the war is that it could have been, at least the war in Europe could have been avoided if the powers that be had shut Hitler down and financially forced him from power. But we don't learn from our mistakes, and we still haven't, I don't think. We still fight wars, needless wars. Maybe man will learn. I hope it's not too late.
That's a good point, Jim. Very good answer. Do you believe there could have been an alternative solution to stopping the corrupt force in Europe and Asia?
In Europe, yes, there could have been. In Asia, maybe. I don't think so, because the two groups of people have totally different mindset. Greed played a big role in the war in Asia. Japan needed a market for they were having this industrial revolution there, a boom. And they had goods they had to sell. And they needed rubber from Southeast Asia. They needed raw materials for the market. And there was a lot of greed there. In Europe, greed wasn't so much of the cause, but just man trying to dominate other men was the main cause there.
Yeah. And by that, are you referring to Hitler's force, the Nazis?
Yeah.
Do you believe that the Nazis' motive was driven by pure bigotry and racism, or were there any things that might have caused the Holocaust during World War II?
Oh, many of the Nazis were racist. And yet, to be honest with you, the Jews had put Germany on the world, in the world market, because they controlled some of the money in the country, and they wanted Germany to grow. And Hitler and his gang of thugs, I call it, they didn't want the Jews to have any say-so.
Yeah.
That's why they took them to the camps, exterminated them.
Yeah. Follow-up question to that, Jim. You know, while you were growing up, past the war, the facts that you were taught, would you say they're consistent to the facts that are being taught to this generation, or have they changed? Have they been embellished so that maybe it appears to be less insulting to the United States? What were you taught as a child about World War II, about the Holocaust, about Hitler?
Well, I was taught that war was wrong. You should only have war as the last means to settle something. And yet, if you had war, you should do all in your power to, to make it stand for something.
Yeah.
I don't believe in taking lives, but if you have to have war, it should be for the good and not for the evil. My parents were part of the group that they hoped that the war wouldn't come to the U.S. We were kind of called isolationists back then.
Isolationists.
And my dad being of German descent, and
Tell me, hold on. Jim, you were saying that your parents were part of a group you call isolationists.
yeah, they were hoping that because we had a notion between us and the wars on both sides that the U.S. wouldn't be drawn into it. But that was foolish thinking, really. I mean, the U.S. was not prepared for war at the beginning of World War II. It took a lot of manpower to get the factories running and the airplanes flying and the jeeps driving. It's, of course, the U.S. was hoping, they had this kind of a dream that this First World War had solved all the world's problems, which it didn't.
Yeah.
We weren't prepared for war. A lot of people in the United States didn't want the war. There was a great mass of German immigrants here. They make up the majority in the United States at that time.
Yeah.
That belonged to a group called the BUN, B-U-N. They were led by some defrocked priests from the Catholic and the Lutheran churches.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking the churches, but these people, I hate to say it, they wanted the same thing Hitler did.
Really?
They wanted to dominate people.
And this was done here in the United States,
Oh,
Turf?
yeah.
So it wasn't just in Europe. We had that kind of corruption here in the United States.
They put the government put the FBI and some of the other Secret Service type people to checking these people out, and some of them were put into not concentration camps, but put into like prisons so that they couldn't stir up a revolution type attitude in this country.
Yeah. And
The people in the country finally realized, we have war, we're going to have to do it. President Roosevelt used to come on the radio with what they call fireside chats. And one that I remember, actually, I wasn't very old, maybe 6 or 7. He said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And I think that did more for the mindset of the country. It made people realize War's not right, but you've got to stand up for the right and defend yourself and what you believe in sometimes.
Yes. Speaking of America's entrance to the war, history tells us that the war began and America was delayed in entering the war. What was it that brought America into World War II?
Well, actually, the war in Europe started around 1937. And the Japanese on the other side were already entrenched in Southeast Asia. They were trying to take over part of India. The thing that brought the United States in the war was Pearl Harbor. I mean, that was kind of a slap. We had our Pacific Fleet there with all the battleships. And kerwham, there weren't any battleships left. Of course, some of the people that have used hindsight realize they shouldn't have all been in one place anyway. Luckily, those that were at sea didn't get bothered. They also bombed the bay at Manila in the Philippines and took out a big military post there. But I don't know. America didn't have the mindset for war when it came in. It's just, we just weren't there yet. The government hired public relations people to make the people realize they need to think about the war is going to have to be.
Yeah.
There were so many people against it. One thing I do remember in the war, all the Japanese on the Pacific coast were taken from their homes, sent to camps. Some were sent to camps in the Rockies. They weren't mistreated, but they were subjugated, I'll say that, per the request of the president. Some even came to Texas, down in the valley. Some came to Arkansas. There were some German people, like the ones I described a while ago, the Buns. Some of those people were in the Texas and Arkansas camps. Most people don't realize that the Japanese race that was here, there was a lot of the young people that joined the service already. But they were put in the war in Europe. They didn't want them to have to go against their kinsmen from Japan, which was a good thing. Like the Civil War happened here.
Yeah.
Cousins shot at cousins. Brothers killed brothers. But the Japanese were mistreated that way, I think.
Yeah.
It was just a panic by our government.
I love how you separated the World War II in two main sections. You said there was a war that occurred in Europe that was driven by the corruption and the growth of Germany, and the war in the islands.
Okay.
What motivated Japan to attack Pearl Harbor in the first place?
They wanted, by attacking Pearl Harbor, they thought they might be sending a message to the U.S. Stay out of our backyard. Don't bring your goods to sell there. We're going to be the dominant power there. And I think if we had, that'd have been the end of it. But Japan went down and invaded the Philippines, which was an American protectorate at that time. And mistreated a lot of people that were not soldiers, nurses. And I know a man that they went on what they call the Bataan March. They walked through the jungle for 100 and something miles, and half of them all died. And but early, when the war first started early, the military people that had any foresight realized we can't fight a full-scale war in the Pacific and in Europe. So they slowed down the war in Japan by just, and you know, at first it was a defensive war, and then before they went on offense, they sent a lot of the troops over to Europe. And then the Navy and the Marines started taking just island hopping. They knew they could not take the mainland of Japan without losing at least a minimum of 1 million people.
Wow.
So that's why they just didn't get in a hurry to take take back what the Japanese had taken.
So they had moved in increments, so to speak.
Oh yeah, it was a war of attrition. They just go to this island and take it. But the Japanese had even tried to take part of Australia. They bombed the northern cities in Australia. And we had a hard time defending that. The country couldn't fight a good war, could not fight well with being divided like this. They went to, in Europe, you have to include North Africa, because there was a lot of German. Rommel had his army down there. Mm-hmm. And Dwight Eisenhower took over down there, and they made pretty quick work of Rommel. The men he had didn't want to fight.
Yeah.
So when that was over with, they started planning to go in through Europe, in through Italy, and the push for D-Day to go into France.
Wow.
It happened before we landed in Italy. But a lot of people were dropped in France by parachute and glider. There was a man at our work that was a parachutist with the Screaming Eagles, and he dropped in St. Mary's Elise. They took the town, he said, by just firing 2 or 3 shots, because the Germans ran like mad.
Right.
But then you had to watch, at night they'd come back. And he told me a lot of tales about the war, about the real stories of the war, not what you saw in the movies or anything.
Yeah. You mentioned Italy and France.
I think that brings up a very important subject. Jim, who were our allies during the war?
Well, our allies were Great Britain and France.
And was Italy with the Germans, or?
Yeah, Italy was part of the Germans. But Italy, they're lovers, not fighters.
Yeah.
They had this guy named Mussolini that was the head.
Mussolini.
He was kind of like Hitler. He had big dreams. But he took some of his soldiers from the war effort, went down to Ethiopia, and those people with spears and rocks and clubs ran them out.
Yeah.
And that kept Germany from going into Russia at the right time. Oh, Hitler was mad about that. You invade Russia in the spring, because you don't go into Russia in the winter. You freeze to death. But Hitler made a mistake. Oh, Russia was also on our side.
Yeah.
If it suited their means. If it hadn't been for the U.S., soldiers would all walk to the front. We delivered trucks and guns, because you have to realize the revolution in Russia came just about the time of the World War I. So the Russians had just, shut down they had a lot of soldiers, but they didn't have anything to fight with. I felt sorry for them that way. They had lots and lots of soldiers. The same man I told you about at our work, he ended up being on the general staff in Berlin. And he said he kind of felt strange sitting there right in the city. He told me how many. Said there was 1 million Russian soldiers surrounding
Wow.
them. And yet we flew those airplanes over their heads and took food to Berlin. He was the one also that went into one of the prison camps where the Jewish people were. And they weren't just Jews. There were Catholics there.
Wow.
They were, yeah. And that's strange because so many Germans are Catholic. The southern Germans are. The northern Germans are Lutheran. But the priest, the Catholic priest in Germany tried to stop the war and they couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
So they got herded up and sent off. But when he went into this camp there, he was one of the first, say, 25, 30 soldiers to go in there. He pulled out his little Leica camera and started taking pictures. And the word got back to his commanding officer and he said, "You will not have those pictures developed."
Wow.
Because it was pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
Said they pulled people out of ovens and poured water on them to keep them from burning. They were on fire. It said, and these people that nowadays say the Holocaust didn't happen, I saw the pictures. It happened.
Yeah.
Here again, that shouldn't have happened. That was the kind of people we were fighting. And I'm not saying all the Germans were that way. Less than 10%.
Really? Were part of the Nazi.
The Nazi group, yeah.
Uh,
That's why so many, there's a movie on right now about trying to, do away with Hitler.
Uh-huh.
And,
The one with Tom Cruise in it, I believe.
huh?
Is it the one with Tom Cruise?
I don't know, but
The Bell Cries?
this, he belonged to a group. There was a lot of German generals even belonged to it. And his detonators in his suitcase didn't detonate all the bombs, so Hitler didn't get killed. But if he had 2 or 3 of the German generals, one that was head of the Navy, one that was head of the Wehrmacht, just the army, not the Nazi side, and another one, they would surrender Germany to the Allies if we would have let the German soldiers go to the Eastern Front and keep the Russians out. They didn't want the Russians in there.
And why was that?
Well, Germany had gone into Russia and just slaughtered a lot of people in one of the towns there. One of the large cities. They fought all through a winter there, knowing that they probably never gotten out. Yeah, it was. The Russians and the Germans don't like each other.